Welcome back, everyone. So tell me, are you also a community enthusiast like I am? And if you are, then you might have realized over the years that being a community enthusiast isn't easy at all. I mean, yes, the idea of a solid, engaging community seems great, and it's only natural to want to grow the community more and more each day. But there's a lot that you can't find in the blueprint of communities and the theories which surround them. The best ideas, I feel, and ways to grow a community come from years of practical experience. This is why, folks, we have an exceptional panel of amazing people from the truly community space. And they are here to answer any question that come to your community curious mind. So ask away. And to moderate this panel, we have our very own community maestro, Varun Luthra. With over 10 years of experience in working and building amazing communities, Varun helps brands effectively connect with their customers and provides them with community strategies aligned with their business objectives. Welcome to the stage, Varun. Over to you.
Thank you, Sana. I hope everyone can hear me. Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Varun, and I'm the moderator for this session today. And I'm sure that you all been having great time so far with some amazing sessions that are going on. And we promise that over the next few sessions, you'll continue to get some amazing content and a lot to learn. And we promise that we bring you more stories, and that's why we have a panel that is full of ideas, and the panel that is not only good on the inside but has the power to make you fly, with three of them and I. So please allow me to welcome our three wonderful uh, hosts for the day, Rena, Lauren, and Lois. Hello, ladies. Hi, Rena. Hi, Lauren.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. Excited for this conversation.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I mean,
Likewise.
Rena, yeah, would you please, sort of briefly introduce yourself for our audience while we continue getting the questions over the chat?
Sure. I'm Raina. I'm the Senior Director for Community at Good Inside. We're building a community of parents that's like a central hub with a library and community. And it's really like such a joy to be able to connect parents. I'm a social worker by training. I'm an executive coach turned community builder. And before Good Inside, I built, then migrated, then rebuilt the modern fertility community. Ask me anything about building super intimate, deep communities that connect with your business objectives.
Excellent. Thank you, Rena. Lais?
Sure. Good to see some familiar faces here in the chat room already. Great to be here. My name is Lais. I'm from Brazil. I think, like everybody in community, I started building communities accidentally without knowing it had a name back in 2007. I worked for in community from the nonprofit, public to private sectors, from working for the Malaysian government in developing their startup ecosystem to helping governments all over the world build communities that foster economic development by the hands of Startup Genome. Then joining on deck and building a whole curriculum for community professionals and getting a fellowship built by heads of community, VPs of community, senior community managers, and by basically creating kind of like a community MBA as founding director for the On Deck Community Builders Fellowship. More recently, I decided to join a startup again and serve as head of community at 3i, building a private network of investors and trying to get them to make friends and share interesting ideas and deals, and mostly trying to scale intimacy. I like to phrase it that I am a community architect. I love the idea of community architecture as in how to scale empathy and intimacy through systems. So I can nerd all day, all night about architecture and putting communication systems in place for community building. And that's who I am. Thank you, Varun. And Reina, Lauren, nice to be here with you.
Thank you, Lais. Lauren?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren. I'm from upstate New York, currently coming at you from Budapest. But I am the Senior Director of Marketing and Community for Power to Fly. If you don't know who Power to Fly is, we are the diversity recruiting platform fast tracking economic equity by upskilling and connecting underrepresented talent to roles in highly visible sectors. I launched our virtual events platform and community in 2018. So I like to say I was doing virtual events before they were cool. And I'm really excited to have this conversation today, talking a lot about where virtual communities stand, how we can make them better, and of course, diving into so many other exciting tidbits about building and growing and scaling communities. So thanks so much for having me.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, let's dive into this. With the topic, the common roadblocks in building an online robust community, right? So maybe if you want to share, a line or two about your experiences while you started your communities or grew your communities respectively, and while we wait for the questions to pop in. So
sure.
Yeah,
Do you want to
share,
start?
Yeah, please.
Just pointing fingers.
Anyone can start. Lais, you wanna share your experiences?
Yeah. So just to frame it more precisely, it's very broad. I think that most of my experiences came from actually building what we coined as economic communities at Startup Genome. I actually am someone who came to conclude, I wrote a book called Hacking Communities, I forgot mentioning, and then I actually did a book review on it, which I really appreciate. And I've been trying to build a curriculum for community in itself. I think that I've been trying to figure out what community is, and I'm still on that path. And I think we are all somehow in that path of understanding that community as a department has more than just community. Today we understand that it's not just about having a community manager, it's about having a community designer, a community architect, it's about having a community operations. Within community operations, we have events, communications, and we have community growth, which is within which we have advocacy, which is what many people see as community because it's the shiny object, of course. But there's no way to get to advocacy before we actually build relationships, which is community ops, and before anything that's community strategy. So I think that all encompassing, my experiences of building community came from building grassroots communities based, very, very event-based, very, very offline, online to offline interaction to startup grind, to trying to scale that. So I think that the biggest challenge for any community builder is to get out of the way and leave the room and make sure that the community exists beyond them. That's what I wrote mainly in my book about, very principles focused. But the idea of community is that when a community works and it's truly owned by its people who are serving towards what I call the 5 Ps, which is who are the people, what's their purpose, what's the programming that brings them together, what's the platform where they stay connected, and what's their participation, what does contribution mean? For that to work, you need to have a leader who's willing to become obsolete. And I'm going to stop there, but basically that's where I'm coming from and what I like to talk about.
I'll just hop in. We can all go home because Lais just laid it down for us. One of the things that I loved what you said is around this structure and framework for all of the sort of community departments to play together. And, even if you're a one-person team, as I was for a long time, I think that we need to keep sort of these ideas in mind that working on some of these things at all times allows us to move everything forward. Lais, you want to pop those in? Or do you
I'm going to write them down in the chat.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that one thing that I think is really incredibly important about communities is never forgetting the why for your business and why for the member. They're two different things, but they work together. But if you only focus on the goals of the brand, then it's often at the cost of the member's experience. And if you are an empath like me and you focus too much on the member, then you forget about the brand goals or the goals, like the KPIs. I think somebody asked about this, right? And like KPIs are great. Like it gives us something to focus on. It gives us something to think about, but it's not always the hard and fast answer that we might need. So let me pause there. Lauren, do you have anything else?
I mean, both of you really covered it. I don't think I have anything else to add there, but I agree. Being customer centric and putting your community members first. I know we'll talk a little bit about this in the coming questions, but regardless of the customer life cycle too, I think you need to remember that your newest customers and your advocates should all be people that you're investing time and effort in. So yeah, I think being customer centric is the number one priority in making sure you're maintaining the health and sustainability of your community.
And I'd love to just bring from what Lauren said. I think that like when I try to always like find the patterns and create like systems that could be replicable on community, I think that one of the biggest deals of community is creating what I call like this user contribution cycle, which in essence is what Lauren just called like the customer journey. And the reason though I suggest including like contribution to that, it's because if people don't have work to do, you are a service provider, you don't have a community. So it becomes a community when people become part of the solution. It's that they deliver value through people, through your people, beyond value through product or service. For that to happen, you need to craft very clearly and hone in that customer contribution journey or user contribution journey to understand what are the key actions you want your people to take for them to go from new member into top contributor. And that eventually creates those layers of engagement that some people call orbits, some people call contribution layers, some people call closing the circles. I call that closing the circles. Regardless of how many layers you have, you want to create those layers of, depending on what actions they take and in which degree they are a top contributor or they are an inactive member. And those need to be quantifiable. And back to what Lauren was saying, I think that customers in community are protagonists and not the audience. And oftentimes we forget that implies that we need to tell them what to do and we actually need to give them work to do. And they will want to do that.
Oh my gosh. +1 to all of that. One thing that I think is really interesting for probably for all three of our communities or many communities that we've built is that like every company or every, solution typically has like a different definition for what community might look like. And I think, Lace, what you just said about like community being part of the solution is like at the center of that. And when also why I get really triggered when people say that social media is community, right? Like I think I have a visceral reaction when I hear that. But I'm really excited to dig in a little bit more and talk about like engaging communities and like if you're hearing crickets, what to think about and all of that stuff, because solution, like the community being the solution, is such an important part of this discussion.
Yeah, which by the way, sorry, I keep talking. That just brings me to the first question from Samantha Vinia, like that she talks about, actually I was trying to understand what she meant in the beginning, but I think it's applicable now. She said like, what is your opinion on the term lurker? And if I understand what she means, she's talking about those people who are like in the community, but they're not actively participating, right? Is that what you mean? I don't know if she's in the chat, but I don't know what Reina and Lauren, what do you understand by that, by the term knowledge lurker? And I think unless reading and observing is part of your key contribution, like you need people to just be there and react, maybe like reacting to messages, liking posts is part of what you call contribution. I think that itself is very, very basic, but maybe that works for very highly scalable, like high scale, massive communities. But I think that like maybe if people are just lurking, unless you have a role for them and room for them and a purpose for them to be doing that, I think it's worth questioning if they are engaged at all. And that's my perspective. So it highly depends on what is your user contribution journey.
Yeah, for me, I think it goes back to that question of like, what is the function of the community for the brand? And like, I've seen some communities do this successfully where like lurkers get their support questions answered by something else. And so like by having that in the community, like they don't get the customer support team doesn't get a ticket, and they like that response number goes down. So I think that could be a valuable part, but I also agree with you, like engagement and like contribution and like adding in rather than pulling out, right? Like if it was community was a bank account and like what people contribute is like adding like a deposit, and then whatever you take out or like what you're just lurking is like a withdrawal. So I really resonate with what you just said.
Yep, and Lauren, there is a question as well in the Q&A session, which says, what are some proven strategies to keep your community team focused? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess this kind of ties in. I was going to follow up to what you said, Reina, but again, and to what Leigh said earlier about defining what active means for your community. And when I think about my community specifically, there's it's job seekers, right? If I was looking for a job every single day of my entire duration of being a community member, that would also not serve the purpose of Power to Fly. So, there comes a point in my community member life cycle where I have achieved like ultimate engagement. So for us, it's, what does that mean? And again, going back to that life cycle, I like to think of it as like an affiliate or advocacy program. So how do we make those people who have ultimately achieved your mission or are really far away from achieving that mission, get them motivated? And, a lot of people talk about, and I'm a really huge proprietor for gamification. And what does that mean? But I also know that when people hear the word gamification, they also think about money and budgets. And for many of us, we work for startups and don't have those resources and funds available. But I think there is a certain amount of gamification that everyone can do from even a freemium level, whether that's access to like exclusive workshops or, one-on-one sessions with top members or your executive team or events. Even we've used like free coffee certificates. There are lots of like easy ways to like bring those lurkers in and move them through that funnel. But before you even can do that, you need to define like, what is your goal for these community members? And then once they've hit that goal, what's your goal for getting them to become an advocate and ultimately a referrer to bring more people into your community? And again, it's that cyclical, coming in, advocating, coming back. How do you really create that ROI and create KPIs around that engagement and that life cycle? That's kind of my perspective on that.
I just wanted to double click on the life cycle concept, Lauren. I absolutely love that. And I've seen this in other type of communities, like where you had chapters and directors who would lead chapters, like geographically. And I knew that directors would have a life cycle of average 3 years, with exceptions of people who would last forever and like be there for 10 years. But those are rather the exception than the rule. And accepting your life cycle and understanding that in your case, people have to accomplish success when they accomplish their goal and technically leave their community as participants and become like Jedi Masters or whatever you want to call them. Finding a way to honor them as like the elders and give them a role that of course isn't as active as the previous role, but giving them a sense of still ownership of their community. I think that's very hard to do, but I think it starts with acknowledging your life cycle. And I find as if you're a young community, you usually don't have that problem. You don't even have the life cycle word in your brain because in less than a year you haven't figured out likely your life cycle. But I think it's a great concept to develop that correlates directly with like first your customer journey, your user contribution journey, and understanding quickly after your life cycle. I think it's fundamental for any community strategist.
And I want to follow up. I think, Reina, you just answered in the chat. Like, how do you get that down? I love that question. I'm so data obsessed, and you really have to be as like a leader in community or leader. I'm a marketer and a community leader. Again, it goes back to defining like what the success metrics are for each of those life cycle stages, and then running conversion rates, right? So for us, it's our optimal customer journey is someone getting a job. So how many people do we have coming into the platform compared to filling out a profile, compared to attending hiring events, compared to applying for jobs? And that can all be done on really basic software. You don't need to invest a ton of money. I mean, we do a lot of it just on our generic Google Analytics and create graphs and funnels and Data Studio reports. I mean, there are obviously so many robust tools in the community space now that you can get super granular, but it all goes back to defining those metrics, because only you know what success at each step of the funnel looks like. And it's putting that into a formulaic process to say, okay, I'm seeing a lot of success at the top of funnel, but down to this goal point, this is where we can work on increasing that conversion.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I think there's this thing about like, if you see a significant drop off between point A and point B, right? Like there's like a sequence that you just laid out. And if you see like a huge drop off, we can optimize for that. You can say like, oh, I realized that, we had people say yes to this, but they didn't actually make it into the community or whatever it is. Then you can workshop with your team or, whoever you're working with and say like, oh, I wonder why this experience broke. And like, I wonder why I wonder how we can make this a little bit easier for them and take away some of that friction. I think the other question about that, Elsie, you asked is like, how do you grab that data? If you're looking for the actual like data, I truly think it depends on what platform you're using and what sort of outputs they have. If you have like raw data that you can just like download to the CSV, or if you're able to pull from like an API. But I think this is a big pain point for a lot of community folks that aren't set up like this.
And also going to that, Rena, I think it's worth mentioning tools available who are trying to do this, like Orbit and Common Room, and of course if you're using Slack, there's a lot of APIs that drag data from Slack. But I just want to double click again on Lauren's point. I think that many of these platforms are also struggling to find out what success means and define love. And I know of Orbit, for instance, great too. I know the founders, Common Room as well, great founders. They all have they are all community-driven people, and they still are trying to provide metrics to you, and it's worth it. But at the same time, you are the only one who can define love within your community, even though there are universal metrics that can be considered worthwhile, like are they retweeting, are they active on Slack, are they sending each other DMs, but is that what you consider highly active? So it goes back to the homework of really understanding what the journey is and what success is, and making it measurable. And thinking about that is part of community architecture, because it's pointless, unfortunately, if you can't measure activity and reward contribution.
I love what you just said, and it's making me think of something else. And I feel like we're getting to this moment in community manager life. I mean, the field, this space that we're all in, is still pretty new, but I'd say like we're getting into that. People know who we are, they know the value, we've advocated for ourselves. So now that we've gotten here, we can't just settle for the mediocre metrics. And that's, I think, what sets a lot of the community managers apart, especially in this super competitive space that we're at right now. They see beyond a lot of those vanity metrics and can look at a community and say, okay, yes, I can pull all this data, but this is what really matters. And I think from a career building perspective, and what can help us move our communities to the next level, is really seeing beyond those, vanity high level metrics and pulling out the nuanced detail that we have been immersed in for so long, and can now, show to other leaders and then make business decisions based on that information. So I think we're in a really monumental moment, just as thought leaders in this space, to be able to make those inferences. And I highly, encourage everyone to dig into your metrics deeper and see what else you can pull out of it, because there's probably probably so much gold in there that you are missing because you haven't dug in deep enough.
Yeah, and I just posted a question from Matthews, that was in the Q&A panel. So if any one of you would want to take it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. It depends on, for me, it depends on the platform, because we can't always target segments on community platforms, but you can do a lot of this work on email. If you're trying to get somebody activated and they haven't been active, you can segment those groups and have special messaging or special offers, if that makes sense for your community, or special events, and like highlight them. If we know during onboarding they said that they were interested in X, Y, and Z, we want to target them and say, oh, we have an event about X, Y, and Z coming up, like you should come and join us, or do you have thoughts about this in the community, or whatever it ends up being, like finding hooks and bringing those folks in. I don't think it's about like the number of segments necessarily. I don't think it's about like, I really think it's about like thinking about the funnel. Where do the people get stuck, and how do we bring them back in, like create an invitation to get back in. Oh, I love the comment about notifications too, if that's something that's within your capability.
I think I can add some light to this question, Matthews, from a more like handcrafted community perspective, because I'm back to startup mode, and it's fun to sort of like almost be designing journeys that are not yet at scale. And I think that's two things. One is that you have what we call right now your master community. And within your master community, starting from onboarding, you have a set of actions that you expect people to take within a specific cadence. Whatever it means to you, it could mean it relates to platform, programming, and participation, which are the three last P's. Platform-wise, how often do you want them to log into your platform and contribute in whichever ways? Actively messaging, replying a message, etc. Programming, how often do you want them to attend events in person or virtual? Third, participation, how often do you want them to help each other, take some sort of action that directly creates value in line with your value proposition. So that's one thing for your master. But as community scale, you also create segments of people based on levels of activity, or based on just like strategies to create cozier rooms. Like Reddit, you have subreddits. So in the community I'm currently building, we have our master community with key actions they need to take, and we have sub-communities, and for each sub-community, we actually have specific actions they need to take within those. So if you have a group of interest for a specific topic within your master community, within that group of interest, they have a commitment, and they almost have a mini version of the 5 Ps for their own. So it's like, it gets very granular. And that's why I would keep it very, very simple. I would have no more than a line of 5 items that you have to track for a community, assuming that you're gonna have segments of that community. And I'm gonna wrap up by saying sub-communities are fractals. They reflect the format of the whole, and they are the same as the whole, if that makes sense. So if you have the 5 Ps for the whole community, you need to have basically the same structure, similar for sub-communities. And you have to have that very clear and trackable. So that sounds very theoretical, but I hope it makes sense.
Thank you, Lais. Thank you, Reina. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for sharing all your insights and experiences and wonderful stories. And if there are any questions that are left unanswered, we are sure to drop in answers in the chat. Thanks for asking some great questions. Sana, over to you.
Thank you so much, Reena, Lauren, Lais, and Varun. We couldn't have asked for a better Q&A than this. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much. And another reminder for our audience that our lounge and booth areas are still live and open for networking. So do check them out and respect with our 101. Let's join our next Fire Chat session on integrating online communities to build a cohesive strategy for success. We'll see you there.